What was Jesus' first miracle?
Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine at a wedding in Cana. John 2:1-11.
Who was the first woman created by God?
The first woman created by God was Eve. She was made from one of Adam's ribs to be his companion. Genesis 2:22.
What was the name of Adam and Eve's third son?
Adam and Eve's third son was named Seth. He was born after the death of Abel and was seen as a continuation of their family line. Genesis 4:25.
Who built an ark to survive the great flood?
Noah built an ark to survive the great flood. God commanded him to build it to save his family and pairs of every animal from the destruction of the world by water. Genesis 6:14.
How many days and nights did it rain during the flood?
It rained for 40 days and 40 nights during the great flood, covering the earth and destroying all living things except those on the ark. Genesis 7:12.
What was the sign of the covenant that God made with Noah after the flood?
The sign of the covenant was the rainbow. God promised Noah that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. Genesis 9:13.
Who was called by God to leave his home and go to a land that God would show him?
Abram, later called Abraham, was called by God to leave his homeland and travel to Canaan, which God promised to give to his descendants. Genesis 12:1.
What was the name of Abraham's wife?
Abraham's wife was named Sarah. Originally called Sarai, her name was changed when God promised that she would bear a son in her old age. Genesis 17:15.
Who was the son of Abraham and Sarah?
Isaac was the son of Abraham and Sarah, born when Sarah was 90 years old and Abraham was 100, fulfilling God's promise. Genesis 21:1-3.
Who was Abraham's nephew who lived in the city of Sodom?
Abraham's nephew was Lot, who lived in Sodom before God destroyed the city due to its wickedness. Genesis 19:1.
What did God ask Abraham to do to test his faith?
God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac on Mount Moriah. However, God stopped Abraham at the last moment and provided a ram for the sacrifice instead. Genesis 22:2-12.
Who had a dream of a ladder reaching to heaven?
Jacob had a dream of a ladder, or staircase, reaching to heaven with angels ascending and descending on it. In the dream, God reiterated his promise to give the land of Canaan to Jacob's descendants. Genesis 28:12.
What new name did God give Jacob after wrestling with an angel?
God gave Jacob the new name Israel, meaning he struggles with God after Jacob wrestled with an angel and would not let go until he received a blessing. Genesis 32:28.
How many sons did Jacob, Israel, have?
Jacob had 12 sons, who became the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. Genesis 35:22-26.
What special gift did Jacob give to his son Joseph?
Jacob gave his son Joseph a richly ornamented coat, often called the coat of many colors. Genesis 37:3.
What did Joseph's brothers do to him out of jealousy?
Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery in Egypt because they were jealous of their father's favoritism toward him. Genesis 37:28.
Who interpreted Pharaoh's dreams in Egypt?
Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, predicting 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Genesis 41:25-30.
How did Moses' mother save him as a baby?
Moses' mother placed him in a basket and set it afloat on the Nile River to save him from Pharaoh's order to kill all Hebrew baby boys. He was found and adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. Exodus 2:3-10.
What was the name of the mountain where Moses received the 10 Commandments?
Moses received the 10 Commandments from God on Mount Sinai. Exodus 19-20, 21-17.
What was the first plague that God sent upon Egypt?
The first plague was the turning of the Nile River into blood, making it undrinkable and killing all the fish. Exodus 7:20-21.
Who baptized Jesus?
Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan River. Matthew 3:13-17.
How many days did Jesus fast in the wilderness?
Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, where he was tempted by the devil. Matthew 4:1-2.
Who were the first two disciples called by Jesus?
The first two disciples called by Jesus were Simon Peter and his brother Andrew, both fishermen. Matthew 4:18-19.
What famous sermon did Jesus deliver on a mountainside?
Jesus delivered the Sermon on the Mount, which includes the Beatitudes and other teachings. Matthew 5-7.
What are the two greatest commandments according to Jesus?
The two greatest commandments are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:37-39.
Who was the tax collector that became one of Jesus' disciples?
Matthew, also known as Levi, was a tax collector before becoming one of Jesus' disciples. Matthew 9:9.
What did Jesus do to feed 5,000 people?
Jesus miraculously fed 5,000 people by multiplying 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Matthew 14:17-21.
What parable did Jesus tell about a man who helped a stranger on the road?
Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan, about a Samaritan who helped a man beaten by robbers when others passed by. Luke 10:30-37.
What did Jesus say is the light of the world?
Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." John 8:12.
How many disciples did Jesus choose?
Jesus chose 12 disciples to follow him and be his closest companions. Matthew 10:1-4.
Who denied Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed?
Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed, just as Jesus had predicted. Matthew 26:69-75.
Who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver?
Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus to the religious leaders for 30 pieces of silver. Matthew 26:14-16.
What did Jesus do at the Last Supper?
At the Last Supper, Jesus broke bread and gave wine to his disciples, symbolizing his body and blood, and instructed them to do this in remembrance of him. Luke 22:19-20.
Where did Jesus pray before his arrest?
Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane before his arrest, asking for strength to face his crucifixion. Matthew 26:36-39.
Who sentenced Jesus to be crucified?
Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, sentenced Jesus to be crucified, although he found no fault in him. Matthew 27:24-26.
How many days after his crucifixion did Jesus rise from the dead?
Jesus rose from the dead on the 3rd day after his crucifixion. Luke 24:6-7.
Who was the first person to see the resurrected Jesus?
Mary Magdalene was the first person to see Jesus after he rose from the dead. John 20:11-18.
What did Jesus instruct his disciples to do before he ascended into heaven?
Jesus instructed his disciples to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is known as the Great Commission, Matthew 28:19-20.